Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Ryan Cole, Senior Fellow and Head of Medical and Scientific Affairs here at the Independent Medical Alliance. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, and what it can tell us about vaccine safety monitoring. Now, VAERS is a tool used in the United States to collect reports of possible vaccine-related injuries, adverse events, after vaccines are given to the public. Now, tonight's discussion is about what happens when possible safety signals are missed, minimized, or made harder to detect. On April 29th of this year, Senator Ron Johnson held an important hearing concerning this topic and how the previous administration's health officials purposely turned a blind eye toward COVID-19 safety injection signals. The legacy media completely ignored this critical hearing and the important information that it did reveal. So tonight's guest was one of the panelists who presented at that important hearing. Our guest tonight is Dr. David Wiseman, a PhD research bioscientist with a background in pharmacy, pharmacology, immunology, and experimental pathology, and might I add, a fellow nerd and a very good friend. And we could talk for quite a while on a lot of topics. And tonight's topic is a very interesting one. And David has the expertise to share on this. He has decades of experience in pharmacovigilance, regulatory science, FDA submissions, drug device development. And in recent years, his work has focused on COVID-19 vaccine safety oversight, VAERS data analysis, DNA contamination concerns, frameshift proteins, and questions related to cancer and mortality outcomes. He's made more than 36 governmental submissions on vaccines to government agencies, has testified before both the Texas Senate and the United States Senate. And tonight he's going to walk us through his work reviewing VAERS data, including his research into what he describes as, quote, signal loss, meaning possible warning signs in the data that may have been missed, hidden, and or made harder to detect. David, so good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Nice to see you, Ryan, and thank you for hosting me and to the IMA for putting us together.
Absolutely. So David has a wonderful presentation, and we could go through all 150 of his slides, or we could go through a few, but we're going to start out with a few very important ones because I think, the way he presents this, it'll help us all understand really what the message is here and really, what's been hidden. And I'll turn it over to you, David. Screen sharing's yours. So fire away, and then we'll chit chat as we go along here.
Okay, well, thank you, Ryan. You can see my screen okay?
Looks beautiful.
Okay, so anyone who's interested can look at more detail at this paper, which we posted into ResearchGate last September. That's the title, and there's the DOI for it. And everything you need to know is in the title. But what I did is let's make sure it works. Here we go. So if you only have the next 30 seconds, oops, can you see it? Did I lose it? Are we still on the screen?
Yeah, reshare, David. Yeah, go ahead and reshare.
So reshare.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. If that happens again, just let me know. I have no idea. I have no idea what happened there.
Computer gremlins. That's to all of us. There
right. Is that good? Okay.
One more click on the slideshow again. There it is. There it is. Looks good.
You got it. You got it. Okay. So this is a complex topic, and what I try to do is really nail it down to an elevator speech or half an elevator speech. So if you just want to look at the first sentence and then go home, then you will know a lot more than you did 30 seconds ago. So the very short summary is that hundreds of COVID vaccine safety signals were lost in the FDA's empirical Bayesian analysis. You want to make it a little bit more interesting. FDA did this analysis, and they lost these signals due to three kinds of things that happened, in my opinion. One is called truancy, one is called masking, and one is called filtering. That explains it a bit more. And the slightly longer, but still not terribly long summary is that these hundreds of signals were lost from FDA's analysis, but this is the really key point that if you go home now and you just remember one thing, remember this, that these signals that are lost represent still mostly uninvestigated potential risk. I mean, that's an important word, potential risk. FDA was legally required to consider without needing to determine causality. That's very important, because every detractor that you will ever hear will say, well, you didn't prove causality. No, we didn't need to prove causality. FDA needed to consider potential risks without having to prove causality in order to make their determinations for the emergency use authorizations of these various COVID-19 vaccines, which they failed to do because of these lost signals. So that's the absolute sort of bare bones summary of what I'm going to tell you. And with that in mind, I'll go into a little bit more detail and just make a couple of definitions that people need to know what they are. So we're going to use the term statistical signal. So a statistical signal is declared when the number of reports in VAERS, and I think everyone knows what VAERS is by now. I shouldn't have to explain that, Ryan. We're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a very, very wonderful audience that's very well informed.
Okay, excellent. So the number of reports that are made into VAERS, when that number, the number of reports for adverse event Y, let's say myocarditis, occurring after a particular drug, let's say Pfizer vaccine, meets certain statistical criteria. There's a magic number with some other criteria. And once those criteria are met, that is called a statistical signal. And once there is a statistical signal, then we can say that we have reason to suspect, and that's an important word that is used elsewhere in the drug pharmacovigilance literature. We can reasonably suspect that drug X may have caused adverse event Y. We can't prove it, but we have a suspicion. But further investigation is required to establish that indeed drug X did cause adverse event Y. And again, to reiterate the point I made a moment ago, that these statistical signals are safety signals. They are safety signals that represent potential risk. That's a technical term. FDA was required to consider for the EUA without needing to establish causality. So those are the fundamental things that we need to talk about. Now, what I'm going to talk about is that FDA was supposed to conduct a certain kind of analysis called empirical Bayesian data mining. Okay, it doesn't really matter what the mathematical method is, but it's a mathematical method to determine whether or not there is a signal that meets certain criteria. And they were supposed to conduct this type of analysis on the VAERS reports on a weekly basis. And these reports were requested by a FOIA request made by the ICANN organization with attorney Aaron Siri. And they made those requests 2 or 3 years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the FDA objected that it was protected information in various ways, and there were court motions and so on and so forth. But finally, the ICANN group prevailed, and at the beginning of January 2025, so a year and a half ago, these signals were made public through the FOIA request. And some people asked me, did I look at it yet? And I'd seen it, but I hadn't had a chance to look at it yet. But let me just show you that the thing that will jump out at you before you even have to do any mathematics. And this column here represents the list of signals. So a signal means a particular adverse event like myocarditis combined with a particular vaccine, let's say Pfizer. So a signal pair, a vaccine pair, means this drug with this adverse event. So myocarditis, Pfizer would be one signal, for example. Moderna myocarditis would be a different signal. Janssen pulmonary embolism, for example, might be a different signal. All those would be examples of a signal. So this is a list that appeared in one of the email alerts that went from the FDA to their colleagues. This was revealed in the FOIA disclosure. And this was the one, for example, on April the 29th, 2022. And what I've done is I've colored the different signals, different colors according to the different vaccines. So the pink color is the Janssen, are the signals that were prevalent at that time for Janssen. The yellow is the Moderna, and the green is the Pfizer. And I've just, because there's so many of them here, there's 124, 110 are Janssen, 6 are Moderna, 8 are Pfizer. And you can see I've just sort of blown up the bottom part just so you can just get an idea of what we're talking about. So for it's alphabetical here. So we have a varicose vein abnormality and venogram things for Janssen. For Moderna, we have the mechanical urticaria, and then and these 5 or 6 others, and then we have these ones for Pfizer. Now, actually, none of them, or hardly any of them, are really medical sorts of adverse events. They're sort of more, procedural kinds of things, like product preparation issue, investigation, wait. We don't really know what that means. Again, for the Moderna, product administration to patient of inappropriate age. It's not something that should be done, but it's an adverse event, but it's not a medical adverse event. So there's very few actual medical adverse events that are going on for Pfizer and Moderna. Quite a lot for Janssen, which you don't see the whole list there. But the thing that jumps out at you before you go into the list at all is just this huge excess. You've got 110 Janssen, 8 for Moderna and Pfizer, which is an excess of between 9 and 22-fold, depending on which week we follow. This is a huge excess, and if FDA believed their results, believed these data, which were occurring week by week, and I can show you the week by week numbers. Okay, this is a huge red flag. Why is Janssen producing more signals than Pfizer and Moderna? Or to ask it the other way, why are Pfizer and Moderna producing such few signals compared to Janssen? It simply doesn't make any sense. So through various calculations, which I can go into if you want to go into the weeds, and it's in the paper exactly how I did it. But I made a calculation and said, this doesn't look right. Let's see what it should look like. And through comparing with other databases and certain papers in the literature that I was able to get hold of, I was able to make the following calculation. So if we had the 124 signals that I just showed you a moment ago, taking that particular date of April 29th as an example, curiously, that's the same day that the hearing was in 2026. I don't know, it's like God has an interesting sense of humor, perhaps, but I had not planned that when I did this analysis. So this is what was in the FOIA, 124 signals, and you can see mostly red, which is Janssen. You can barely see the yellow and green, but it is there for the other two. Now, I determined that for reasons unknown, 281 signals just went missing. There were at least 281 signals that should have been there that weren't there, and in roughly in these proportions. So this is what it should have looked like according to their method of doing the analysis. Okay, so we don't really know what that's about, but that's what I estimate. Now, again, we've done that by comparing with other data sets and so on. Now, then there's another 365 signals that should have been there because FDA failed to take into account something called masking. And masking, which I'll explain in a bit more detail later on if you wish, means that a signal for one vaccine, for let's say Pfizer myocarditis, let's say, gets masked because when the Pfizer myocarditis is compared in VAERS against all other vaccines myocarditis, if the all other vaccines happen to include Moderna myocarditis, which is pretty similar to the Pfizer myocarditis, you think you're comparing Pfizer myocarditis with everything else myocarditis, but the everything else really includes Moderna. So the Moderna is going to artificially bump up your baseline and not allow you to see the difference that's really going on between the true baseline, if you will, and Pfizer's signal, or it could be vice versa. So that's what masking means. I can go into more detail if that's not clear, because it is quite you've got to get your head around it a bit. But once you do, it's pretty easy. Okay, so now we're up to, there should have been 770 signals, but guess what? Wait, there's more. Because they also set the threshold of these statistical criteria inappropriately, aside from the problem of masking and truancy. And so I estimate there should have been another about 117 signals that way. And guess what? There's more, because the way that the FDA do this is that they are not looking at borderline signals that don't meet the statistical criteria, but may have been actually true. They are false negatives, but they should have been positives because they failed to properly investigate them. So a signal could have been a false positive. So some of these signals in this 887 number could have been actually false positives, okay, which the FDA would be very keen to eliminate. But at the same time, they are not equally zealous about looking at the potential false negatives. So there's even another 580 borderline signals, some of which, not all, might have turned out to be positives. But if we sort of, let's just be generous about it and say, well, probably the similar number of false positives and false negatives. Okay, if we just want to go on that basis, then basically when you add up these three columns here, there's about 760, whatever the number is, of signals that were lost. So this is really the bottom line, and you can see quite clearly, you know, I put it all on one graph here, and just to summarize the findings here, that even though I've shown 763 in my calculation, in other calculations that I've done, it could even be in the thousands. That there were thousands of safety signals that were lost from FDA's analysis through these different kinds of mechanisms, what I call truancy, masking, and filtering. They represent, again, just to hammer home the point. It's worth remembering this and being able to rattle this off to anyone who sort of starts to argue with you. They represent mostly uninvestigated potential risk that the FDA was required to consider without needing to determine causality. So again, when they tell you, oh, it didn't prove causality, that's not the point. They didn't need to. And of course, different standards were applied to the assessment of safety and efficacy. So what that means is when the FDA was considering efficacy, the regulatory standard for under the EUA emergency use authorization was that the FDA simply had to reasonably believe that the product may be effective. Okay, that's a big stretch. They didn't have to go into all the usual sorts of proofs and backup studies that you would normally have to do in a standard type of approval. Okay, they just had to believe reasonably. Okay, well, if you can believe reasonably that product may be effective, you have to apply that same standard to whether or not you reasonably believe the product is safe or unsafe, and you have to apply the same standard of evidence to both safety and efficacy. And so, because none of that was done, and we know it wasn't, that these anomalies impugn the reliability of all the regulatory and compensation decisions that were made, and particularly VAERS, which was touted, and this is a quote from CDC, VAERS was touted as the nation's early warning system for vaccine safety. So again, that's important for people to know that that quote exists, and in various forms. It wasn't just said once, it was said many times on many presentations and websites and so on, right? The people said, oh, you can't rely on VAERS because of this and that reason and blah, 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 right? Well, when it suits them to rely on VAERS, they do. And when it suits them not to rely on VAERS, they don't. But it was touted as the nation's early warning system for vaccine safety. So with that, Ryan, I'm going to stop there. That's the summary. If you want to go into details, and then we can go into the hearing and the Senator Johnson's investigation.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think you bring up such an important point, David, and that's that they were required, and yet they didn't follow these signals. And, you know, were they asleep at the wheel? Were they, you know, in not looking? You've heard me say 1,000 times, you can't find what you don't look for. And depending on the type of statistics one uses, you know, the Bayesian analysis versus other analyses, you can literally, and maybe, that sleight of hand magic, that term masking, maybe let's talk about that for just a few seconds before we go into the hearing, because I think this is the point that people really need to take home. It's like if you go to a zoo basically, and there are 100 kangaroos and one zebra, and you say, okay, there's 100 kangaroos and a zebra. Let's compare a zebra to the 100 kangaroos, totally different. But if you throw one zebra in with the 100 kangaroos and compare it to the one zebra, now it's going to look similar. And so by adding the zebra to the kangaroo group, you've now masked the signal of what you're looking for.
Right.
And so that's what they were doing in some of their comparative analyses, because as many of us know, like say the Pfizer papers and all the FOIA documents on the cajillion pages that they wanted to hide for decades from people. And again, more great work on FOIA requests by ICANN and others to reveal that data. We wouldn't have any of these if there weren't very assiduous attorneys going after this information. So, I mean, I don't know if my analogy works well enough, but kind of to that point of masking, anything else you want to layer onto that?
Well, actually, that's a great. I love the kangaroo zebra. I've never heard that. Can I show you? Because when you see it, I'm gonna. Can you see my slide?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna. Actually, Senator Johnson. And I know we sort of a little bit of a spoiler alert, perhaps, but let me just find that. Here we go.
I love this one. Yeah, this one's great.
So let me just put the screen share a bit. Oh, what happened there? Hang on. What happened? It bounced back. So actually, we spent a lot of time. Here we go. We spent a lot of time trying to come up with a good analogy that people would understand, and it sounds like we should have been able to do it really quickly, and surprisingly, it was not very easy to do. And Senator Johnson sort of came up with this hemlock and arsenic analogy. So let's say you want to compare the toxicity of hemlock and arsenic, and I put them in a blue bottle and a green bottle there, and the height of the bottle is the amount of toxicity, whatever that means. And if we compare the amount of toxicity for hemlock and arsenic separately against some baseline innocuous substance, which we'll say T, and it's in this little T box over here, you can see there's a big height difference between hemlock versus T and arsenic versus T. So you can see they're both equally unsafe by this amount of the arrow. Okay, so far so good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now what happens though if the baseline, right? If we add, let's say we just want to focus on the effects of hemlock, and we add the arsenic data to the baseline data. So now this column here, which we're going to call baseline, but it has the T, but it also has arsenic, but we're not telling anyone it has arsenic in it. People don't realize it's got arsenic in it, but it has. So now the height of this column is all the way to the top here. Okay. In fact, this is slightly higher than the hemlock one, not much. So we'll just say these are more or less equally high, equally tall, more or less. And so the hemlock looks fairly safe compared to the baseline, because the baseline is over here. But no one really knows that the baseline includes the arsenic. So the baseline has been artificially elevated because you've included the arsenic. Okay, so that's what masking is. So imagine that the hemlock, let's say, is equivalent, as it were, in a manner of speaking, to myocarditis, for the Pfizer vaccine. Okay, and we want to compare myocarditis for everything else, and that's represented by the height of the T, little T box there, and we've got Moderna's myocarditis is represented by the green bottle, but we're adding the Moderna's myocarditis number of reports to the T's reports, but we're calling all of that baseline. And people don't realize that the baseline includes the myocarditis. So when we say Pfizer's myocarditis doesn't look that bad compared to the baseline, yeah, it doesn't look that bad. But actually, no one told you that the baseline includes Moderna's reports. So that's what masking is. Is that
That's very clear.
Is that clear? Or okay.
Hmm.
Now it sounds like silly that we should we spent a lot of time trying to figure this how to say it in this sort of way, but more puzzling is, well, surely the people who are running these analyses knew this. I mean, come on, this is like so basic. Like it sounds like I should be coming out with some huge mathematical formula that quantum physics or string theory or something to explain this. No, it is this stupidly simple. This is how stupidly simple that problem is, right? And when you see that, you say, well, what the hell were they doing? What were they thinking? So you want to go to that part of it or not?
Let's go to what were they thinking,
What were they thinking?
why
Okay,
did they want to hide all of this, I
why
guess.
do,
Well,
okay, so
we can't answer the why, but let's show what they were
well,
thinking.
actually, we can answer the why. Okay,
Okay.
we can answer. Okay, so we're going to jump around a bit
That's great. That's great because there's
and just sort of see where this flows and if it's making any sense. Okay, so part of my analysis was to try and figure out what was going on in this empirical Bayesian data mining method, and I came across this paper here in a journal which is called Drug Safety. You see the title, Signaling COVID Vaccine Adverse Events, and the first author is Harpaz, and includes a couple of very interesting people. They're all interesting people, but the second one is really interesting. His name is William Dumichel. This is this guy on the left, and it also includes this lady here, Anna Schaafman, this lady on the right. Okay, and who are these people? Well, William Dumichel works for Oracle, and Anna Schaafman, at the time of this paper in 2022, worked for the FDA. And the paper, interestingly, says the findings and conclusions expressed in this report are those of the authors and not necessarily represent the views of the FDA or the federal government. So Anna Schaafman, who's working for the FDA, is writing this paper, but in her personal capacity, right? And they're talking about signaling COVID vaccine adverse events. And the whole paper is about masking. It's saying that the FDA's method of doing this thing called empirical Bayesian data mining is flawed because it is prone to masking of the kind that I just showed you.
mm-hmm.
But what makes this even more interesting, and so there's all sorts of if you look in and I had seen this paper a couple of years earlier, and I quoted it in some different things I'd written, but I hadn't focused on this particular aspect of this paper. I was using the paper for some other reason, but I hadn't focused on this aspect. And in the supplemental appendix, by the way, that's where all the good stuff is. Okay, mm-hmm. All the good stuff in any paper is in the supplemental appendix. Read that first, all right? Because that's where the juicy stuff is. And sure enough, it is. And there was a treasure trove of data and comparisons with different kinds of comparisons, which I was there able to use in partly in the analysis that I showed you with the with the lost signals and the numbers going up and up and up. Okay, but what makes this really super interesting is that who exactly are William Dumichel and Anna Schaafman? Well, William Dumichel is the guy that invented the mathematical method called empirical Bayesian data mining. He invented it, right, in about the end, like late 1990s. And not only did he invent it, he then developed this software called Empirica, which is what the FDA uses to do all these analyses. So this is the guy that is the father of this method. I mean, this is the guy that gave birth to it, as it were, with Anna Schaafman, who was at the FDA in the late 1990s and only recently in the last year or so retired. Okay, but he and Dr. Schaafman worked very, very closely, and she was the FDA internal champion for developing that method in the late 1990s, bringing it into the FDA and making it the gold standard of how they do pharmacovigilance. So these are the two people in the entire universe, right, who are eminently qualified. This isn't Ryan Cole and David Wiseman just sort of writing a paper and we know those guys are crazy anyway. What do they know, right? These are the people that invented the system that the FDA are using. And here they are writing a paper in 2022 that says, guys, the system that we invented, developed, championed, got into the FDA is flawed. they're writing this. And amazingly, this gets through the FDA clearance process. I don't know how. I've got my suspicions how that happened, right? But it gets through the FDA clearance, even though Dr. Sharpen is writing in her personal capacity. She has to still get everything cleared through someone to allow her to publish this with her name on it. And it's saying that the method that was used is flawed. There's an updated method that Dumichel developed using the same software. There's a feature within the software that they can access this particular feature that the FDA had access to, right? Mm-hmm. And if you use that other feature, the demasking feature, then you will remove largely the problem of masking. And they're writing this in 2022. And I'd seen it, probably around about 2022, but not paid. I wasn't focusing on that aspect of it. But in the beginning of 2025, when these FOIA the FOIA disclosure came out, then I looked at the paper again with different eyes, and I said, wow, something is going on here. How is it that these people are able to publish this, and they are basically saying this system is completely flawed. And so it will come of no surprise, because you and I have been on different panels with Senator Johnson, and every now and then, we get a call from someone, and we're asked a particular question about something or another. So what happened was that Senator Johnson had, I think, subpoena is the right word. He subpoenaed all sorts of records from Secretary Kennedy, and about a year ago or so, he was given 11 million pages of different FDA and CDC types of records to do with the COVID vaccines, 11 million pages. And I was interested to know the number one question that was on my, aside from doing the analysis, which I showed you, which saying, oh yeah, there's a lot of data missing here, or signals are missing. I want to know, what did the FDA know, and when did they know it?
And when did they know it? That's such a
and when did they know it? And you go through 11 million pages of documents, but we've got some keywords and different things that are obvious to look at. And so about 3 months ago, something like that, 4 months ago, they started to find Anna Schaafman, which is, I said, we need to find Anna Schaafman. That's what we need to find. We need to get hold of Anna Schaafman. So they found in the records, in the emails and so on, a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm only just going to give you a few examples, but there's an absolute treasure trove there. And I can I'll give you the link, and anyone who wants to look at that report, that there's a whole bunch of really, really interesting stuff. But I'm just going to give you like what I think are the really top comments. This one blew me away, and this was so again, spoiler alert here. What happened? What we found out was that Anna Schaafman, who was in the FDA, she's working in the drug division, not the biologics division, as early as December 2020, meaning the vaccines were not quite rolled out yet, but they're about to be, was already communicating to her colleagues in the biologics section of FDA. Guys, when you do your signal analysis, you better be aware that there's the potential here for masking, which could be significant. It was always known to be a problem, but at a very low level. It was always a known issue with these types of analysis, the way these particular analyses are done, right? That wasn't a new thing, but it was always considered to be a very low level. But for various reasons, one mainly to do with that these vaccines had a lot of commonality with each other. Pfizer and Moderna sort of work more or less the same way, with some subtle differences, but more or less the same. She said there's going to be opportunity for masking, and Dumichel has developed an updated version of the algorithm that hopefully can at least get around most of that problem. Anyway, so she was communicating to that early in December 2020. And then throughout 2021, and I think even going into 2022, she was communicating to various people within the FDA, including Peter Marks, directly and indirectly, She was communicating analyses that Bill Dumichel was doing, right, at Oracle, giving them to Anna Schaafman, right? And Anna Schaafman was then communicating those to people within the FDA. And this is one quote that she, I can't remember what this was about, March, I think, June 2021, I can't remember exactly. But she says, I am not astonished that, referring to FDA's data mining system, that it was unable to detect these signals, right? That Dumichel had identified as being masks. She was not astonished that they were failing to find these signals. In other words, she was warning them. She was providing information, right? She was saying, guys, there's a problem here. Wake up, right? Wake up. And there was emails after emails, and every just when you think, this email can't get topped, there's another email that says more stuff and more stuff, and FDA knew. They knew early, and they failed to do anything about it. So I'm going to show you the one. I've got 3 quotes here. So one of the analyses that Dumichel did uncovered 49 examples of what he called extreme masking, where using the old method, you didn't see these signals. Using the new method, you did see these signals. And there's one here, sudden cardiac death. I think that sounds fairly important to look at. Just a little bit interesting. Acute myocardial infarction. I think 1 or 2 people might be interested in that one. There's let's find some other ones here. That ischemic stroke. I mean, you like that one? The embolic stroke. We're talking about some serious looking stuff here, right? And so this is one of the analyses, and that was in March 2021. Dr. Schaafman, she's sharing these analyses from Bill Dumichel. He's found in this analysis, this is all COVID vaccines together, 49 examples of extreme masking, and 20 of those showed a statistical effect when you adjusted in various ways. Okay, that was in March 2021. Remember, we're talking about the time when the myocarditis story was beginning to break. Okay, now September 2021. Remember, again, put this into the context, Ryan, of what's going on in sort of mid, March to September of 2021. We've got the Janssen, pause thing that went on. We've got the myocarditis signal that went on. We've got the full approval of the Comirnaty with that whole episode with Marion Gruber and Philip Krauss, who were under pressure, it seems, to give a full approval to the Comirnaty. All right, and then of course we had in September the mandate, executive orders, and then we had the children's dosing and the booster dosing. So all of this is going on, right, while Anna Schaafman is giving all this stuff to the FDA, her colleagues FDA, right, and saying, guys, wake up here. And so there's an email which is going from Peter Marks, who is the head of the biologics section, to Patricia Cavazzoni, who was then at that time the director of the drug section, under whom Anna Schaafman worked, and basically Peter Marks is saying to Dr. Cavazzoni, you better, keep your lady in check there, and he's saying here that that she has been asked, Dr. Schaafman, to cease and desist from conducting their analyses. This is about as bad as it gets, Ryan.
Yeah.
This is about as bad as it gets.
We're seeing all these harms. Hey, be quiet. We don't want
potential harms. They're potential harms.
Potential harms, yeah.
Right?
And they're required to look at it by law.
They're required to look at it, but we don't even want to know. Don't do these analyses. We don't want to know. Right? And then this was slightly earlier, but this is another name that sort of pops up in the story. This is Dr. David Menshik, who was at FDA. At one point, he was sort of in charge of conducting these empirical Bayesian data analyses, which were being done by a subcontractor, not within the FDA, but a company, a contracting company outside of the FDA. and he was starting to get suspicious. And I suspect that from various things that he was trying to back off of this because he knew there was a problem here. And then there's indications in the publicly disclosed record that looks like he was getting wet feet about this, and he didn't really want to be part of this. And he sort of seemed to have backed off of this and try to dissociate himself. But one of the things that he did, he commissioned what was called a special project run of this MGPS is the old method of doing this Bayesian analysis. And he commissioned a run that used the old method, but was able to adjust without using the new method, but using certain other methods adjust for masking. And he found that when they used this special run, that there was what he called a muting trend, which is another word for masking. So in other words, he basically confirmed in his method of doing it that Dumichel was right and Anna Sharpman was right. So this email going from Dr. Marks to Dr. Cavazzoni, I mean, they're all unbelievable emails. Just as an aside, whether it makes any difference or not, you decide. But can you guess that prior to her appointment with the FDA around about, I don't know, 2019 or 2018 or something like that, can you guess which pharmaceutical company Dr. Cavazzoni might have worked for? Any wild guesses?
One of the three that are being evaluated there.
Right. Okay. And can you still see my screen, or do I lose it?
Yeah,
and then she left FDA at the beginning of the when the Trump 2 administration came in. What was that? 2025? What was that? So she left just around that time, and then about a month later she went to work again for, any guesses?
Pfizer.
Any guesses? Yeah.
Pfizer.
But anyways, that she wasn't working for Pfizer, at least on the books then. So okay, can you see my screen or not? Are we still there?
You can pop it back open if you have another slide to share there, David.
Yeah, let me show you this screen because this is sort of let me get back to share. I don't know what we lost it there. Here we go. Right, let me go back to the right. Can you see it? Right. Okay, so basically, I just want to make a huge shout out to Senator Johnson, of course, who, unbelievable leadership. We both know him somewhat well, and just, but even the sort of more personal interactions that we both had with him, just what an impressive guy, just a super nice guy to work with. I mean, when you see the way his staff interact with him, you can see they all love working for him because he's, he obviously treats everyone well and with great respect.
And he cares about humanity. He
really does. He really does. So obviously, this is under Senator Johnson's leadership, but the staff that he has is spectacular. And I don't want to mention their names, so I'm not sure that they want me to. And they're very actually unassuming guys, but really very dedicated, smart guys, want to get the job done, and they really did a spectacular job in getting all this done. There was a letter that Senator Johnson wrote to Kennedy about beginning of April, I think it was, end of March. Spectacular letter, and then based on, again, all this report that is in the picture on the right there was based on the initial work that I had done, and then that sparked off of this whole investigation about all these emails that we've just talked about. And so there should be a link somewhere at the bottom there that anyone can go to and find the hearing. That's me testifying for my 2 cents worth there. And but all the details of these emails and so on are in this report. But I think there's so many emails, but I think the only other one that's really, there's many that are just unbelievable to believe, but this one explains really, what did they know, when did they know it, and why didn't they do anything about it? And this is another person within the FDA called Dr. Zinderman, who is writing to Anna Sharpman, and he's saying, you have to read the whole email, but it says results from adjusting parameters that raise or lower sensitivity of the alerts as the vaccination campaign is underway could lead to confusion and have unintended consequences, e.g. regarding vaccine competence. So basically, they knew this was a problem. They acknowledged this was a problem, right? mathematically, but they said we're not going to do anything about it because
It,
because we cannot jeopardize anything that might compromise
yeah,
vaccine
they
hesitancy.
didn't want, yeah, the hesitancy was the word I was going to bring up. They didn't want anyone to be hesitant, even though they had all of these signals.
Right, right. So, and then again, the other context is that the React 19 group, Bree Dressen and Joel Waskog, and amazing people. We both know them well. They had a series of meetings with mainly Dr. Marks and one or two of the other people under him, I think towards the end of 2021 and into 2022. And they had recorded those, and those are up on a website that's available through the React 19 group. The video, you can see the videos, and the people there, the React 19 patients, are saying, listen, no one believes us. We can't get medical treatment. We go into see a doctor, and we say, well, we think we got this problem because of vaccine injury. Right away, they get shut down. No one wants to treat them. No one wants to believe them. And Marx is saying, well, that shouldn't be the case. The doctor should be treating whatever he sees. It doesn't matter what the reason is. He sort of didn't get that. But time and time again, he or Dr. Nair was one of the people that was on some of those meetings, was saying, oh, yeah, we don't dismiss the fact that you may have this neurological issue or this cardiac issue or whatever issue it might be, but we're just not seeing it in the signals. We've not let any stone be unturned. We're looking for signals. We don't see any signals. Right? Yes, of course you don't see signals, but he was telling them that while knowing, and we got all the dates to match it up, so there's no hiding here, right?
Yeah.
He knew that these signals were being masked. And yet he's telling Bree Dressen and Joel Waskog and all the other people, right? We don't see any signals. Okay, at least acknowledge that. Okay, is it causal? We don't know, but at least acknowledge that there's a signal there, and just the betrayal of those poor people. I mean, aside from the whole public in general, but particularly, the people who we know have had a vaccine injury. Or at least highly suspect it, absolute betrayal. People who can't get medical attention, who are begging. These were the people who were stood in line to get vaccinated. These are the people who stood in line to be part of clinical trials. These weren't so-called anti-vaxxers or whatever you want to call these people, right? Absolute betrayal.
So in terms of that betrayal, David, it kind of does bring up a question, and I think this is where, so many people are frustrated at this point because, the story is obviously being revealed. Many of us knew early on the problems we would see. Obviously, those happened. They masked them, they covered them up. The potential signals were all lined up. So these individuals who did all the cover up and told them to cease and desist, in your opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, you're not a lawyer, neither of us is a lawyer, but are there federal laws they've violated in what they've done or what they were required to do and neglected to do? And do you see accountability at some point coming, because of the number of people that literally are suffering or gone at this point?
Right.
What is your view on that bigger, legal picture, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I mean that's the bazillion-dollar question, and I know Senator Johnson's been asked that question in interviews, and I can't do any better than give his answer, right? So I'm certainly not a lawyer, but I think his answer goes more or less something like, he's not a lawyer, I'm not a lawyer. But his team is looking into that exact question as to were any laws violated, any criminal laws or public abuse of funds or abuse of office laws or whatever it might be.
Sure.
I know, there's an investigation ongoing. I'm not party to that. We see Senator Johnson on different interviews to the extent he can get on any interviews. I mean, with the mainstream media just completely don't want to touch this at all. But that is the subject of it seems like, at least from his statements, that that's one of the subjects for his investigation. But even if there's no sort of actual like, criminal liability that someone's not going to go to jail or whatever. But certainly it's a problem that existed. And at the very least, someone says we need to have corrective action put in place as to what needs to be done here. So first of all, obviously, you've got to make sure all the right algorithms are being used, etc. There's procedures in place to review this. There's mechanisms in place that if an internal whistleblower, such as Dr. Sharpman, comes in and says, guys, it's a very credible person. I mean, they couldn't just kick her out. I mean, it was clear in some of the emails that they realized this was a person who'd got awards from the FDA for this sort of work. So this wasn't a person they could easily just sort of dismiss and, whatever. So they knew that. So all of that has to be done, has to be accounted for. And the other thing, Brian, which I think is even a bigger story. I mean, if this isn't bad enough, right? Here's what's lurking. Here's what's lurking deep inside that Harpaz paper, the one I showed you, that from Dumichel and Sharpman. There's a statement somewhere in there that says something like, well, because there are so many COVID vaccine reports in VAERS, good, bad, or ugly, rightly or wrongly, okay, but they're there. There's I don't know what the number is, 90% or very high percentage of the reports within VAERS are having to do with COVID vaccines. And there's such a wide variety of events. I mean, we know the reasons biologically. We're not dealing with one single molecule. We're dealing with, the spike protein, the mRNA, the DNA, the lipid nanoparticles, lipid adducts, and I'm sure you've dealt with all those things that are there. We've got multiple potential toxicants and mechanisms that are going on here. So there's a huge variety. So all those are giving rights to even sub threshold signals, but raising the threshold for all sorts of things. So going forward, what Anna Sharpman and Dumichel are saying in their paper is that going forward, for any vaccine, the ability to detect signals for any vaccine is now compromised, right? That's scary. That means the early warning system that we have for vaccine safety is now disabled. It's like you're disabling your air, defense system. And I think there are 3 papers that are now in the literature, at least I quote them in my testimony, I think, mainly from Europe, looking at the European version of VAERS, which is the Vigilance, and I think there's a Spanish version and there's a Dutch version, I think it is. And those 3 papers basically said, yeah, this is a problem. That going forward, the ability to detect safety signals for any new vaccine of any kind, right, is now compromised. If that doesn't scare the what's the name off anyone, right? Bobby Kennedy, if you're watching this, right, you need to address this right now, right? Right now.
And I think that's the important point in your analogy of just disabling your radar systems or your protection systems. What's the point of even having a system if you're not, number one, if you're not going to act on it, which FDA didn't, but number 2, now to know that your system's broken and you haven't replaced your system. And I mean, those are 2 very important take-home messages. And until such things are done, then there's no trust from the public or reliability in those systems whatsoever, and shouldn't be until corrective action is taken.
Right.
And so, okay, yeah, whether or not people end up behind bars, which many people do want to see, or not, at the very least, we need to change the detection systems. And, VAERS is an early warning system, blah, blah, blah. It goes back many years, or 3 decades. And it only detects 1% of signals based on the Harvard Pilgrim study from published in 2010. So, I mean, this is a system that's underreporting by 99%. And given the technology, software, AI, et cetera, things we have today, we should be able to, through a large language model, search for these injuries much more quickly, much more accurately. I know HHS is working on that and putting the construct forward of real-time surveillance. But at the same time, what you've presented tonight, I mean, clearly gives us the story of, I guess, uncaring bureaucrats is the kindest thing I can say, but at the same time, heroes within that bureaucracy that tried to save lives and tried to step forward. And, Sharpman and Dumichel are, unsung heroes in the story, in the sense that they were waving their hands and screaming from the rooftops, "Hey, folks,
Right.
there's something wrong here. Let's stop." And meanwhile, the administration knew it and kept pushing it forward, and then mandated, knowing that people were being, not only harmed, but there were deaths happening as well, and
Right.
yet
Right.
they masked the signal.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at the myocarditis, and I mean, if you want me to look, I'll just say it because I think we're going to sign off in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
so it's in the slide deck if anyone wants to look at it. But basically, the whole myocarditis story, which broke at the end of, started to raise its head at the beginning of February, I think it was 2021, when the Israelis, with a small population, were
Mhm.
calling up the FDA and CDC, guys, we're seeing myocarditis. What's going on here? And there was like 3 or 4 months of complete obfuscation. Enough time to allow the teenage Pfizer vaccine to get its EUA in May of 2021, and only about a week or two later did they finally sort of start to admit there's a signal there. But when you look at the Dumichel and Schaffman paper, you can actually follow week by week when they're, according to them, when the signals were evident. And if they would have, if the FDA would have used the revised algorithm, they would have seen that signal much earlier. Okay, much earlier. So it was clearly there. And you can repeat that for lots of things. I want to give you just one quote. I mean, are we going to wrap up now, or
Yeah, we'll wrap up. Share one more quote. We'll see if we've got any questions.
so I'll. Do you want me to put it on the screen so I can just say it?
Yeah, you can pop it on the screen if you want to, David.
Okay, let's because it's sort of like visual. People who are the visual people here. So okay, so my written testimony in my oral statement is available on the permanent subcommittee for investigations website, and I ended my oral statement with this quote from Peter Marks, FDA, and Jernigan. I think his name was David Jernigan. I'm not sure. I think he had been with the CDC, and they said, "Listen, failure to detect and communicate a serious health issue related to a vaccine could impact confidence not only in COVID vaccines but in all vaccines." Okay, that's what they said. Okay, guys, listen to your words here and look at your actions there. Yeah, your words do not match your actions. They need to match.
Absolutely. Well, I see Autumn has popped on my screen here, so we may have a handful of questions from the audience. And so I'm going to go ahead and pop it over to you, Autumn, for some questions for Dr. Wiseman.
Yeah, absolutely. So just because we're short on time, I'm going to keep the questions to a minimum. The first question that came in was from Lisa. She asked, would you please explain truancy masking as it relates to VAERS data?
Okay, truancy it's not a term, it's a term that I invented. So basically, I estimated there were signals that were missing in FDA's analysis that I couldn't account for by the masking method, which I explained with the poison bottles, and another thing, but the threshold method, which is where you put the bar, how high the bar has to be. So it was another category of they're missing, but we don't know why.
Yeah, and you can go to like the medical literature and see those signals were there. You can go to like the Pfizer paper, see the signals were there. You could see that there were a lot of signals, but for whatever reason, they were absent.
Right, and even in the Schaffman Dumichel paper, they're actually their estimate of the number. I mean, I don't have the individual listing of what they produced, but they had a table in there that listed thousands, enumerated thousands of potentially masked signals for the COVID vaccines. So I can't tell you, oh, they're this, that, and this, that. Particularly, we do have a small list of what was missing, what Schaffman and Dumichel found, and what the FDA didn't find. We have that. We have a small list like that, but we don't have the large list.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Wiseman, for joining Dr. Cole tonight for this discussion. For anyone that's listening, the slides that Dr. Wiseman shared with us tonight, I know it's a lot of dense information. It will be posted to our website tomorrow afternoon, along with an edited version of this discussion. So if you guys missed anything, you can find that information at imahealth.org. Thank you so much, and for both of you for being here. I'm going to switch over to our closing.
Can I just say one thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just to hammer this point home.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know everyone's sort of familiar with the gain of function and the lab leak and all those. Hugely important topic, hugely important topic. Second only to that topic is this topic. Okay. So any other thing, which there's plenty of other stuff that Ryan and I and others have talked about, whether it's DNA contamination, lipid nanoparticles, discrepancies in the clinical trials, Brooke Jackson's case, all those things are hugely important. But this is the second most important thing, second only to the gain of function lab leak. Where did the COVID even come from? And people need to realize that. And this has to be on everyone's agenda. This has to be fixed.
Yeah, and I want to, before you go to closing announcements, Autumn, I want to thank Dr. Wiseman. I mean, his work, you can tell what a detail-oriented, caring researcher David is, and Dr. Wiseman is he's a gem. I'll just put it that way. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Again, I know the topic was dense and it's a lot of data, but at the
really
end,
important information.
that's
Really important.
that's the whole thing. At the end of everything that Dr. Wiseman's presenting here are human beings and human beings that have been harmed. And I like to think, look, the quote that says, the moral arc of history always bends towards justice. So let's keep that in mind. And with good people like Dr. Wiseman, on the job and all the other wonderful colleagues that are still working for justice, we're going to continue to do that. And I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight, Dr. Wiseman. And, more to come, folks. And thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Wiseman, and everybody who joined tonight. And
thank you. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for your work, everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Over to you, Autumn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wiseman. Thank you, Dr. Cole. I'll take it from here. First, I wanted to remind everyone about one of the many educational resources that we offer here at IMA. IMA Academy is a place where healthcare professionals, patients, and lifelong learners can continue learning beyond these weekly conversations. It features courses, conference content, specialty resources from independent experts, and CME opportunities are also available. You can explore the full library at academy.imahealth.org. Again, that's academy.imahealth.org. Second, please join us next week for another important conversation on children's health. On Wednesday, July 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern, Dr. Liz Mumper, IMA Senior Fellow, will be joined by holistic pediatric nurse Maureen McDonald to discuss raising healthy kids through food, mood, and taking a more whole person approach. We hope you'll join us next Wednesday. Before we close, we wanted to share a short message from IMA Senior Fellow Dr. Molly James as part of IMA's Medicine at 250 campaign. As we reflect on America's 250th anniversary, this campaign looks at where medicine has been, where it is today, and how we can restore roots of patient-centered care for the future. If you'd like to explore the full gallery of articles and short clips from our doctors, you can find the library at our homepage at imahealth.org. Thank you all so much for listening to tonight's discussion, and here is Dr. Molly James.
As we celebrate 250 years of American healthcare, we have an interesting dichotomy that is facing us today. On the one hand, we have AI, we have advanced technology, we have these individualized precision care options that patients are looking for more and more. And if you look at the platforms that are taking over, most of medicine is looking at how can we do more with technology. But on the other side is really my draw, which is the human element. As we get more techie, the human element is getting sterilized out of modern medicine. And I feel like this is really where system medicine is missing the mark. Because although patients want the upsides of the technology, they still want to be known like they were before in the olden days, like the family doctor. They want you to know their name. They want you to know what they do, who their family is, what their beliefs are, not just what their labs say. They have questions. They want to be understood. When they come in with a cancer diagnosis, they don't just want to know what are my tumor markers and how many rounds of chemotherapy do I need. They want to know, why did I get cancer in the first place? Like, what are the risk factors that are unique to me that I can flip and switch? This is one of the things that we're doing in our clinic. And I think any clinic that wants to succeed moving forward has to really fight the urge to pull into a technology-only mode. They have to find the balance, use the best of technology behind the scenes for the testing. We have state-of-the-art testing in my office. People want those answers. They want to know a lot about their biological health. What are my numbers and all of that? But they want it delivered with kindness and humanity and that energy of sitting in the room with someone who genuinely cares about them. Unfortunately, the system has built a model that doesn't cater to this. They have built a model in which the medical visit, the 7-minute visit, is the product, not the doctor-patient relationship. We're building Maverick Medical Ventures to help people who don't feel satisfied providing care in the system, and for patients who don't feel like they're getting care in the system that they want to have. We will help doctors leave the system, build independent practices so that we can deliver that kind of care that has the tech advantage in that old school, genuine caring environment that most patients are looking for. So as we round the corner on 250 years in medicine, there is a way to bring the best of both together, to let patients have all the technology that they want at their fingertips, but deliver it in a way that you ask about their grandkids, you know when they're going to church, and you can talk to them as a human being instead of a medical record number in the chart.